Hi, I'm at the first day of Crop Diagnostic School. I'm here with Kirk, cereal specialist with Manitoba Agriculture. And earlier this morning you were talking about nitrogen calibration in winter wheat and fall rye. Can you talk a little bit about what you were talking about this morning?
Sure, we're talking about doing a nitrogen ramp to look at, like what your target is based on your soil tests, going below and above. So we recommend, if you're interested in like diving a bit more into your nitrogen rates in your cereals, just taking a look at using a nitrogen ramp, going from 0 and then up to increments of 20 up to say about 160, 180, 200 to really compare with what your field would be, so like whatever the nitrogen recommendation was from your field based on the soil test, and then comparing that to the nitrogen ramp to see, are you actually hitting what is the greenest, and then also considering, if we're applying more nitrogen, is that economical as well? So
Right.
A couple of considerations there.
You were talking as well about a chlorophyll test you can do in terms of leaf tissue to see how well the nitrogen has been taken up into those plants. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so once you do a nitrogen ramp, if you're interested in looking at that, there's a few things that you do to indicate nitrogen sufficiency. So one, just looking at it with your eye, how do the colors look? Beyond that, you could actually look at the amount of biomass produced. So you could actually cut samples, you could take it to yield and take yield samples as well. But during the growing season, sometimes it's hard with your eye to actually identify the green color. So depending on the time of day, if it's a quite bright sunny day, it's really hard to identify differences in the greenness of the leaves. So there's a few other things we use. One is just a simple color chart. You could probably make something similar like with paint chips, but there's actually ones you can purchase where it goes from kind of like a yellow green to a really dark green. And it's not to identify like which one is sufficient and which one is deficient, but just within your plots to see, if you have 80 pounds per acre or 80 pounds of nitrogen per acre compared to 100, is there actually a color difference or are they about the same? The other one is the SPAD meter, and that one just also measures the chlorophyll in the leaf. So you press the flag leaf between the paddles of the SPAD meter. You can do it a few times per plot to get those readings. And like I mentioned, those readings don't really mean anything on their own, but when you compare it to the other plots to see like what's your maximum green content and where do you sort of fall off, it can be an interesting test to do.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about the strategies farmers can use when they're putting their nitrogen down. When it comes to maybe spring application or fall application, how does that look for some growers? What should they take into consideration?
Yeah, so with winter cereals, you're looking at, you can apply all of your nitrogen in the fall, all of your nitrogen in the spring, or a split application. There's risks with all, so if you're applying all of your nitrogen in the fall, the risk is that you could have excessive leaching if you have a wet fall. You can also have denitrification, so gassing off of that nitrogen and it wouldn't be available to the plants. And you could also have excessive top growth of your plants. So if you have a lot of green growth of your winter wheat or fall rye, you risk having a less healthy crown going into winter and perhaps more winter kill. If you apply all of your nitrogen in the spring, the risks are that one, it could be dry, so you could apply your nitrogen as a broadcast, and if it doesn't rain, that nitrogen isn't actually getting down into the soil to your plant. Or it could also be too wet, and you could delay your spring application. If it's too wet to be driving in the field, you might not get your nitrogen until too late. We recommend doing a split application, so a portion of your nitrogen in the fall, a portion in the spring, and it kind of reduces the risks of both of those potential losses. We also know that winter wheat takes up about 30 to 40% of its total nitrogen needs by stem elongation. So we really want to make sure that nitrogen is on and available for the plant by the time stem elongation happens. So we don't want those excessive delays in the spring. If we apply a portion of the nitrogen in the fall, that takes away that risk of that spring application.
So would that lead to the thought that there's probably different nitrogen strategies to take into consideration for winter wheat and fall rye? The uptake requirements are going to be different.
Yeah, so the rates that you would apply for winter wheat and fall rye would be different, and we do have tables available at Manitoba Agriculture's website looking at like if you have a specific amount of soil nitrogen, and then if you're in like a high, medium, or low moisture zone, what amount of nitrogen would be recommended to apply. For fall rye, nitrogen requirements might differ a bit between open pollinated and hybrid fall ryes. So hybrid fall ryes are a bit more efficient at their nitrogen. So we'd be looking at about 1.6 pounds of nitrogen per bushel of expected yield for hybrid and about 1.9 pounds of nitrogen per bushel of expected yield in an open pollinated fall rye.
Well, the plots are looking pretty great since when I was back here in May,
yes.
talking about winter kill, if I'm not mistaken. Is there anything you wanted to add that I didn't ask you about today?
One other consideration that just speaking of the winter kill, is we did look a bit at plant stands and yield considerations in some of the low and higher growth areas in the winter wheat. So some of those areas where we had low plant stands, comparing the actual heads or the spikes that have developed now to the higher density areas. And really we're looking at, I think the last time we did our head counts, it was say like 30 spikes per our area in the lower density area and maybe 35 in the higher density area. So those lower density area really tillered a lot and made up for some of that that winter kill. And it's kind of an interesting experience to do those yield estimates now, just to see, you know, what you might expect in some of those different areas of the field.
Great, terrific. Well, thanks for your time, Ann. Great
Thank
seeing
you
you here again.